But I do call your attention this evening to the 56th Psalm. The 56th Psalm. What do you do? It's the question where you ask something like, what do you do when you don't know what to do? Where do you turn when, you don't know where to go? It's when you get the phone call, and maybe it's in the middle of the night or the wee hours of the morning. Or it's even in the afternoon when the doctor's office calls, and they usually don't tell you the details, but sometimes you can tell by the tone on the lady's voice, or you know because if things were good, you didn't need to come back for 3 months, but they're saying, we're going to set you up on an appointment next week. You need to come in. You need to talk to the doctor. Or it might be when you get the email that says your job application has not been accepted. Or where you're sitting there, maybe it's late one night, and you realize that the relationship you had thought was so solid has already begun to crumble. What do you do? When you pick up Psalm 56, that's the vibe or the feeling of this song to God, this prayer of help, or prayer for help. Now, if you want to read some of the historical backdrop to this one, you might look, and I've got it on the handout, you might start about Psalm. You might start at Samuel, 1 Samuel 21, and you almost have to read several chapters because there's a number of points in David's life here from 21 to 29 of 1 Samuel that seem to fit the setting of this psalm. Now, there is a subscript, and I'm not sure that is inspired. There's some debate about that. I lean toward it not being, as more of a traditional note. But you'll likely have something at the head, or under the heading almost, under the title, that gives you some possible idea of when this occurs in David's life. But it is at least a time when David is in trouble. David is running for his life. Likely the first time, it's not the only time though, that David will be running for his life in his life. But it seems to be about the time when he's running from the king, from King Saul. Let's take a look at these three ideas, these three answers to the question, what do you do when you don't know what to do? And instead of having to list those separately, the title is the answer. So if you want to go ahead and fill out those, you're welcome to. From Psalm 56, these are almost the takeaways up front. What do? You cry. Maybe you actually cry tears, or really this is about crying out to God for help. And then, in turn, you rely on God, on His grace, on His cross, on His empty tomb, His promises for now and the future. And then you comply. You comply. And I'm not going to say any more about that one. I don't want to give too many spoilers on that one. I'll just let you hold on to that, and we'll come back around to it, Lord willing, in a few minutes. Let's open up to the first part of Psalm 56 now and consider cry. What do? You cry. I think about a young child. Perhaps they're learning to ride a bike. And this might be a time before training wheels, or this is the training wheel. This is the moment when you've taken the training wheels off and they fall down. And they begin to cry. Maybe they've scratched their knee up pretty good on the pavement. Going to have a pretty good scab there, and maybe even if it's really bad, a scar to tell people about later. But when we cry like that, when we're in pain, sometimes we're just crying because it's a natural response, but typically, you think about a young child, they may even cry out the name of a parent. Or maybe not the name. Most kids these days don't call their parents by name unless, and if they do, sometimes they get in trouble for that. But they'll say dad or mom, or maybe at that point it's daddy or mama. And so the tinge of pain fills the air, and there's a cry for help. That's what you do. You don't have, as a Christian, you don't have to just cry. You get to cry out for help from your God. Look at the first part of Psalm 56 now. you cry. David begins by saying to God, I need your mercy. And some English texts even use the word mercy, and it's almost an exact parallel to Psalm 57, have mercy on me. But the English Standard does here use a slightly different English term. It refers more specifically to God's grace. You could easily substitute, I need your mercy, I need your grace. He says, be gracious to me, O God, for man tramples on me. Man hounds me. There are people that are panting after me. They're just so eager. That's part of the meaning of this word, it seems. That's how it feels. It's like I've got predators after me, and they're panting in their desire to hurt me. And then he says they do this all day long. He's going to repeat that phrase in verse 2. This is a constant thing. This is ongoing. This is throughout the day. And picture it, if this is, let's say, when David is running, this is a lengthy period of time. This is not one moment in David's life when he's having a bad day. It's not Monday. It is a lengthy period where he's going through it. It says, all day long, an attacker oppresses me. Verse 2 now, my enemies, once again he uses the word trample on me, and then there's that repeated phrase, all day long. For many attack me. Another repeated word, proudly. If we broke the poetry, we'd say, it feels like there's a whole army after me, and they're happy about it, they're proud of it when they're chasing me. But this doesn't have to just apply to people. I mean, there are times when our troubles are people problems. Go back to that relationship that's crumbling, or maybe you've got enemies that are after you, people that are trying to bring you down, people that are excited when you fail, and they cry when you are victorious in life. But maybe the attackers here is a mountain of bills piling up. Maybe it is the medical condition. It is the chronic illness, the pain that won't go away, that wakes you up or keeps you from sleeping. That's the situation of this, I need your mercy. That's what you're supposed to do. Sometimes we talk about things we shouldn't do in our pain. But here's one thing I should do, is I should reach out to my God. And then there's this different kind of prayer. You might say that the first part in the first couple of verses is a pleading for help. I need your mercy. By the way, you can parallel that with Psalm 56. It may even be on the same page for you. And Isaiah 57, verse 15. It's a plead. But then if you skip a couple of verses with me, now there's more of a request. And there's this theological term you'll see that's imprecatory. And an imprecatory psalm, or a part of a psalm that is imprecatory, is when the psalmist calls on God to be God in judgment on others. And so if you look at verses 5 through 7, he not only says, I need your mercy. If you wanted to keep the same, you could say, I need your judgment, but I put, don't let them win. Don't let them win. There is a healthy place for saying to God, don't let wicked people, whether they are attacking me personally or not, and you kind of have to try to distance that. You don't want it to be some kind of personal vendetta, but don't let wicked people be successful. Don't let them be successful for the end of all things. And you might even then translate this into, can you take care of this problem? And we know God won't always do that in this life, in His wisdom, in His overall view. But it's okay to say, can you remove the thorn? Can you remove the problem? Now, He may come back, my grace is sufficient for you. But that's in 5 through 7. Look at it. He says, all day long, there's that phrase for a third time, they injure my cause. All their thoughts against me are for evil. They stir up strife. They lurk. They watch my steps. You almost need a painting here because of how visual this is. You can see it. They're waiting in ambush. They're lurking. They're watching him. He says, they've waited for my life. For their crimes, will they escape? Are they going to get away with it? And then he says, in wrath, Cast down the peoples, O God. It's quite the prayer, isn't it? Toward his enemies. He says, don't let them win. And then he comes back to a softer note. And you can almost look at this psalm that way, that there's a balance here of the opening pleading with pain and tears to the imprecatory, don't let them win, to now he says to God, you remember, you care about me. Look at verse 8. He says in verse 8, you have kept count of my tossings, or even my wanderings, my tears. He says, put my tears in your bottle. Are they not in your book? This is when he sees God collecting his tears. As if in heaven, God had this little bottle, or maybe it's a large bottle for David and some of us, and he puts his tears in the bottle to remember his pain. And as if God pulls out a special ledger and opens it up and writes down the problems and the pains and the struggles of his children. Now, there is a tradition that says this was something ancient people did. That they had a special bottle, and I just drew a blank on the word. It's a lock. There it is, lock crematory. A lock crematory. You almost sound like you got to speak Scottish or something. Lock. A lock crematory is a word. It's a Latin word for tears, and the tradition says when you were mourning your loved one, you would collect your tears in a little bottle, and then or maybe a clay or ceramic bottle, and then you would place it in the grave when you buried your loved one, just as if you were leaving some of your grief already with them. And that did happen later, all right? But it may not go back to David's time, is what I'm saying by tradition. It may be something that just kind of sounded good, and people thought, well, David said that, and it may have been because they did find them, okay? But the archaeologists lean more toward they were for perfume and things like that. You think about Jesus' burial, and they even go back. It's when the women find the empty tomb, right, to add more spices and perfume to his burial. That may be what they were when they found them in ancient burials. But for David, he's seeing God do this with his tears. Don't miss the forest for the trees, I guess. At least David is portraying God as that's how much he cares about us. We know he numbers, he has the hair on our head numbered. Well, here it's as if he's collecting our tears. Maybe sometime when my Bible is, as we say sometimes, there's some wet drops on my Bible, and it's not the coffee, it's my tears. Maybe sometime I ought to think about Psalm 56, verse 8, and God's tear bottle. Or I could think forward to a time when it is said that there will be no more tears. If we kept the imagery going, it's as if God one day is going to destroy the bottles. He's collecting them, and then one day he's going to throw them down and destroy them. And as the bottles crash, eternity with God is ushered in. What do you do when you don't know what to do? You might put it down this way this evening, that it's okay to cry. It's okay to hurt. It's okay to let things get to your heart and break your heart. It's part of this human experience. But when I cry, may I also cry out for mercy and grace from God. Now let's go back to the parts we skipped over a moment ago. Not only cry, but rely. Rely. I know this is not a picture of the Elk City Rodeo, okay? But whether you are riding a bull or driving down one of these narrow two-lane roads where you are separated by a few inches of plastic, a little metal, and a few more inches of oxygen from the other car, whatever you're doing, and there's certain situations like that when a little fear may always be there, and in fact may be healthy, right? Like if you get to where there's certain things in life you're not afraid of at all, you might get careless. You might get in trouble. There's certain things where you need to have at least a healthy respect. Isn't that how we like to say it? We don't like the word fear. We'll say you need to respect this animal you're working with. Or, if you're using firearms, you need to have a certain kind of respect for what they can do. Fear is also okay. David's afraid. Now, I don't know that you want to say you want to stay there in this full setting here. Because our faith in God is meant to overcome our fears. But just like we're going to cry and hurt, part of why we're going to cry and hurt is because there are things that we're afraid of in this life. We're afraid of losing a loved one. We're afraid of a bad diagnosis. We're afraid of a broken home. And so when we're afraid, that's the real question. What do you do? Trusting in God doesn't mean that I'm never afraid. It means I keep trusting in my fear the one who hears, the one who knows my fears. So go back to verse 3. Notice what David says. In Psalm 56, verse 3, he says, when I am afraid. He doesn't say, I'm never afraid. He doesn't say, oh, I've never feared anything because God's got me. He just says, when I'm afraid. Now, what does he do in his fear? He says, when I am afraid, I put my trust in you. In God, whose word I praise. He never stops praising God. Even in the midst of the problems. You can make an easy P outline there, right? In my problems, I keep trusting and praising God, and I point my own heart to God. It's often been said that I can either allow my problems to drive me or at least help me go further away from God, or I can allow my problems to drive me to God, to get closer to God, to not forget His nearness, His closeness, and to realize even when my life is falling apart, or at least it feels that way, God is still worthy of praise. And sometimes praising God in the middle of the pain helps to center our hearts. He says, in God, whose word I praise, in God I trust. And now, he says, verse 4, I shall not be afraid. And now he asks, what can flesh, what can these mere mortals really do to me? And he's going to repeat that refrain. It's the refrain of the psalm in verses 10 and 11, with praising God and asking, what is it really that people can do to me? And this is the part of this song that is later quoted in Hebrews chapter 13, verses 5 and 6. Let's turn there and read that for a moment. Look at Hebrews 13, 5 and 6. There are some other echoes of this psalm that I see in some New Testament writings, but this is the only one that is a direct quote. It's in Hebrews 13, verses 5 and 6. It's worth backing up to verse 5 because of the context the Hebrew writer puts this quote in. It's about money, of all things. Now, that's not necessarily David's struggle, but notice the way that this part of the psalm is applied now. Keep your life free from the love of money, or from love of money, and be content with what you have, for he has said, I will never leave you nor forsake you. A quote from a different passage, and then he says, so we can confidently say, the Lord is my helper, I will not fear. What can man do to me? There are a few different ways to take the promise, to take the way we can lean or rely on God. And that can help us with our contentment. It can help us with a number of different things in life where we learn even more to rely that much more on God. So when you go back to Psalm 56, and you look at verses 9 through 11 that are part of the remaining verses, you notice how he is so confident. He's confident that things are going to turn out right in the end. Things are going to be okay. I mean, right now, he's running for his life. He's afraid for his life. But he has this confidence that says, I know God is with me. And there's a line in verse 10 that is either him saying, this is what I know God is with me, or that's certainly true, but it could be, I know that things are going to work out in the end okay because God is with me. I know He's going to be there. And then you get the repeated refrain. In God I trust, whose word, and the God I praise, and the question, Why should I be afraid? You can break this down from an emotional standpoint and say, because we're human, because of our emotions, we're going to be afraid sometimes. But part of the ultimate takeaway is that we don't have to be afraid. And we can even ask ourselves questions like this, like, why should I be afraid? Why should I fear? And you could change that. You could say to mortal men, you could say to Satan and everything he can throw at me. Job is one that knows better than some how much Satan can do. And yet he's also one who learned to rely on God, to be careful, to guard his heart through the whole time of suffering and pain. What are you afraid of tonight? I know a man from years ago, and this was something he did as he began to have some health troubles. When he would go in for a procedure, he said this was what he always thought about. You know, we have different things. For some people, it's Psalm 23. They'll quote that as they're maybe even going under the anesthesia or something. But for him, it was Psalm 56, verse 3. When I am afraid, I put my trust in you. What is the only time that the human author of Psalm 56, David, is afraid of people? Did you know there's only one time in all of recorded Scripture when David is said to be afraid of humans? He's a man who fears God in that healthy kind of respect. But there's only one time in what we have recorded when David is said to be afraid of a person. And it's back in 1 Samuel. It's in 1 Samuel 21, verse 12. And it doesn't just say that he's afraid. The English text says something like he was very or much afraid. This isn't no passing feeling for David. This isn't just a little. He is scared to death, we'd say. And that just may be either then or sometime after that, reflecting back on that, when he writes these words, when I am afraid, that's when I put my trust in you. What do you do when you're afraid? What do you do when you don't know what to do? You cry to God for His grace, and you rely on Him. You trust that grace to carry you through. Now, we've got 2 verses left, so let's go back to them, and we'll finish the psalm together tonight. Lastly, this evening, comply. It is not the first mile or the second mile. For some of us, it might be, but for the runners, it's not the first or the second mile that gets them. It's that 20th mile when things get tough, when the lungs are burning, when everything in their body, and your body, let's say if you're putting yourself in their running shoes tonight, cries out, and it might be that one word, quit. Quit. It's not a marathon on the road. It might be that it feels like a marathon in the struggle of that broken relationship, of the unanswered question about your health. Sometimes you'd just like to know, right? I mean, the fear of the unknown is one of the highest fears we have because we just want to know. And there are times when we let that, you might call it Satan's whispering, you might call it life's dare. There are times when we begin to listen and let that voice take over that says the same word, quit. Quit. And that might be in a more direct way to your life, to just give up. Or it might be your Christian life. It might be you even question, what's the point in serving Jesus? And sometimes we learn this from an early child, from our childhood. We think, if I'm good, if I obey, if I get baptized and I go to church, everything will be great. No bad things will happen to good people. And so this third one is don't quit. And when we say comply, I don't mean that as cold obedience or where you just say, okay, I'll do it anyway. I mean that as a willing, loving submission where I say, no matter what happens, I'm not going to stop doing what's pleasing to Jesus. I will obey. That's verse 12. For David, it's I will keep my vows. Look at it. I'm in Hebrews 13. I better go back. But he says this, Psalm 56, verse 12. I must perform my vows to you, O God. I will render thank offerings to you. I'm going to keep my commitments. Might be how we would say it today. We tend to not do the vows, and we give thanks, we offer thanks. We don't bring an animal sacrifice and give that as a thanks offering to God anymore under this covenant. But the principle remains of following through. Now, caveat. This means I keep being a Christian, what a Christian should be. I keep living like a Christian should live. It doesn't mean that I don't make some changes. It may be healthy to cancel some plans. It may be that I need to change my area of focus where I'm serving. Maybe I need to do something different than what I've been doing in the church. I'm still going to do something. I'm still going to be active and involved, but maybe I need to change a pace, or maybe it's a time to kind of back off for a little bit. There's nothing wrong with taking a break. Maybe I've been teaching the same Bible class for 5 years, and I just lost a loved one, and it's a good time to take a healthy hiatus from that. That's just one example, okay? I'm not trying to pick on any one thing or anybody in here tonight. And if you've been teaching the same Bible class for 5 years, maybe it's time for a break anyway, right? There's a place for saying, I'm going to do what I'm supposed to do. I'm going to keep my commitments, but I need some rest. I mean, sometimes we go the other way, right? We want to be busy to distract ourselves, but sometimes we need time to be quiet and rest in our struggles. When somebody loses a loved one, sometimes as the church, maybe they start missing some services. Maybe they were somebody that was there every time the doors were open, and they start missing a Sunday night here or there, or they're not there the first Sunday morning. Their husband dies on Friday, or the husband dies, let's say, I didn't write this out ahead of time, okay? Let's say their husband dies on Monday, and the funeral's Friday, and they're not there that first Sunday. And sometimes as the church, I wonder if we go too far, and we're trying to be encouraging, but you need to be there for your church family, to be there for you. You don't need to. But it's okay to recognize I'm not in the right frame of mind to be a part of that communal assembly. Maybe today, maybe this Sunday at least, will be a good Sunday to stay home and worship quietly. See, I said I was going to tell you that, right? I said don't get baptized this morning. Now I just said don't go to church, right? And if you want, okay, I said it's a caveat, okay? If you want a specific scripture on this idea, look at the last part of Leviticus 10 sometime. The first part of Leviticus 10 is popular because it's about worshiping God in the proper way. And when you do what is unauthorized, there are consequences. That's Nadab and Abihu. But what happens at the end of Leviticus 10 is the other side of this. When Aaron and his remaining sons are critiqued by Moses, and I think it's the only time when Moses doesn't have an answer. The Bible just says he held his peace. Of course, I'm one that definitely thinks Moses wrote that too. So, he wrote that about himself. Do you feel that balance here, or that threshold of standing here and saying, I'm not ever going to give up. But it's okay to make some healthy changes. And go back to verse 13. He says, I will obey, and then I will anticipate. I'm looking to the future too. Part of why I can obey the way I do now, even when life looks like this, is because I know life won't always look like this. Verse 13, he says, for you have delivered my soul from death. And I wonder if this isn't a kind of predictive tense here. I mean, has it already happened, or is he saying, I know you're going to, and so it's already happened? My feet from falling, that I may walk before God in the light of life. And you might hear some echoes of that to Psalm 16:11 and the prediction about Jesus, him not being left in Sheol, not being left in corruption in the grave. You might hear some echoes of the promise of resurrection for us. And this one here, you can think about this as God walking with you and helping you to have a renewed life emotionally, but it does seem to be about the actual resurrection also. God's going to deliver me in this life and in the next life. Sometimes it's helpful to turn our perspective and think about what's going to happen in God's promised future. And then, when he says that part about the light of life, or the life-giving light, you can think about it from a biological standpoint and what light does for life, for human life, for plant life, for the entire globe. Or you can think about it more theologically, in that we know there is one that is the light of life, the one who came and took on human life and laid down that life as the light of the world to give us both of those, light to walk by and life to keep on walking. What do? You realize the one thing I'm not going to do is stop obeying. And so in that way we say, comply. We've seen these three from Psalm 56 this evening. You cry out to God for grace. You then rely on him. You keep on trusting him. And then you keep on obeying him as well. It means this week I'm going to know that he hears my cries for help. And I'm going to continue to trust him even in my fears. And I will continue to obey Jesus, come what may. There's a song for us. It is the song of God's grace. It is the song of God's invitation to come and be with him. And yes, we're going to sing a song now together that is its own invitation to come and live life with a God like ours. So as we're about to sing this song together, the invitation is to do what we said this morning, to repent and be immersed. For most of us, it might be something like being reminded and refreshed to come back one more time to the throne of grace. Sometimes God steals the storm. Sometimes God steals his child in the storm. I'm thankful, aren't you, that one day every storm will cease and we get to dwell forever with that God of grace. Let's stand and sing together.